From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana. It's one of the great scandals of our era. A Kafkaesque nightmare where innocent people were accused of something they hadn't done, were hounded by the authorities and sometimes jailed for years, all for a crime they hadn't committed. For most, the true horror of the post office scandal only came to life with the ITV drama Mr. Bates versus the Post Office.
There are people here who've done time. We've all lost our businesses and our savings. The question is, what are we going to do about it?
One of the most moving parts of the drama was the story of Martin Griffiths, a postmaster from Cheshire who was accused of stealing £100,000. The stress he experienced was horrific.
Can I talk to him?
Well, he won't talk to me about it, even now. It drives me mad. I know he's got depression. He's a proud father, and I think he thinks he's failed us. Failed our family.
For Martin, there was no justice. The stress built up and he lost hope until one day, tragically, he parked his car by the side of a road and stepped out in front of a bus, taking his own life.
I think that moment, for a lot of people who didn't understand the post office scandal, seeing that dramatised was very shocking.
But now we know he wasn't alone. Just 11 days after Martin Griffiths killed himself, 40 miles away, another postmaster, Michael Mann, did the same. This is his story.
Mike was just such a lovely person. He was so happy.
If the post office hadn't done
Oh,
this,
he hadn't wanted so much stress from doing all that.
he would be...
I'm sure he'd still be.
We always knew we wanted to do something and wanted to clear his name, but obviously we didn't really know the ins and outs of it.
The story today, the death of a postmaster.
When Sir Win Williams brought out Volume 1 of his Horizon IT Inquiry report in July, he had a section on people affected and people who died by suicide or attempted suicide or suffered significant ill health. And in that section, he said there were at least 13 people who are suspected of taking their life because of the post office scandal. But he named only 2 of them because their names were made public during the inquiry. So he said the names of those persons were not made public in evidence given to the inquiry, with 2 exceptions, namely Mr. Michael Mann and Mr. Martin Griffiths.
Hugo Daniel is a reporter for the Sunday Times who's been piecing together the story of Michael Mann.
And so Martin Griffiths was known because he was one of the people whose stories was depicted in the ITV drama Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. But Michael Mann, that was the first I'd heard his name, and no one had actually sort of reported on him before. That sparked my interest, and I mentioned it to the editors and said, well, I found a couple of documents about this Michael Mann, but I think we should look into it because no one's really heard that name before and would be interesting to find out what happened to him.
Hugo, just remind us what the post office scandal was.
The post office scandal was basically a scandal in which a faulty computer system called Horizon, made by the Japanese electronics company Fujitsu, was wrongly suggesting that money was missing from post office branches.
In 1999, the post office rolls out a new system by Fujitsu called Horizon. Within the first year, sub-postmasters start reporting problems, with the system creating false shortfalls.
This took a long time for anyone to realise this, but during that time, more than 900 people were prosecuted for theft and false accounting. This carried on until the late sort of 20-teens, so the last prosecution was 2015. 2015, but by 2017, there was a High Court case begun by Sir Alan Bates. He was a postmaster who was caught up in the scandal, and he led 555 postmasters in a case in the High Court against the Post Office, which they won in 2019.
The Post Office today issued an unreserved apology. But for 14 years, it prosecuted hundreds of sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses on the basis of a computer system it knew was defective.
Since then, more and more people have come forward. More than 4,000 people were being told they're eligible for compensation. Convictions were overturned, but many people have not lived to see justice.
At least 13 people may well have taken their own lives due to the scandal. It is extraordinary.
So, Hugo, you had this name that appeared in the report that hadn't been reported on before, Michael Mann. How did you go about investigating what had happened to him?
So once we saw Michael Mann's name in Sir Wynn's report, the first thing I did was try and find out what happened with his inquest.
The inquest, which was held at South Manchester Coroner's Court in 2014, was recorded.
When I heard the inquest, that's when I could hear more about what had happened to him. The coroner read out who attended, and he said there was somebody from the post office attending on behalf of the post office observing. Then we heard the main evidence from Phil Edwards, Michael's partner.
When the verdict was delivered by the coroner, it said that Michael had taken his own life and no one else was directly involved.
But indirectly, he said that there was a worry, and the upset of all that had been going on had clearly been weighing on his mind. One thing the family told me was they remembered attending the inquest, and that the post office employee who was there observing it didn't make eye contact and didn't say anything to them.
So you were tracking down people who'd been in the room for the inquest, Michael's family, and his partner, Phil.
And then I went up to Leek in Staffordshire, where Phil Edwards was from.
No, he was working in the post office in near Hazy Grove.
Near where?
In Hazy Grove, just outside Stoke.
Yeah,
Stockport.
And then I later tracked down one of Michael's siblings and his niece and spoke to them.
He was amazing. He was the most loveliest, happiest person.
And I also was able to track down people who worked at post offices with him.
Hugo, tell us a bit about Phil Edwards. Was it something he wanted to talk about?
When I went up to where he lived in Leek, I knocked on his door and he answered, and I said, are you Phil Edwards? And I introduced myself. He immediately started talking about it and then, invited me in.
I mean, basically, I'm trying to piece together. Yeah, would that be all right?
And it was, almost like he'd probably wanted for a long time to tell this story because it had a huge effect on him and his life and was a big tragedy for him. We sat in his house for several hours, and Phil, during that time, wanted to show me the letter that Michael wrote him before he died, and he told me what happened, basically.
Well, take us back to the start. What did he tell you about Michael Mann? What sort of person was he?
From what Phil said, Phil and Michael only met in 2012. Michael had come out of a long-term relationship, and they met online and they chatted for a bit, and then they went for a date in Manchester, which was sort of between where they both lived, and they got on great straight away.
They're just very honest with each other.
Yeah, you clicked really.
Clicked straight away.
Yeah.
They became romantically involved, and it moved quite fast.
And then we were just looking for flats to rent. He was trying to find a job.
By sort of early 2013, Michael found a job at a post office in Stockport in Greater Manchester, and they decided to move together to a flat near to that post office. Phil got a job as a pub chef at a local pub, and they were really happy.
I believed in having just this one person in my life.
Yeah.
And it was great, Okay, it was only 10 months to a year, but, I would say it's probably one of the best, if not the best relationship I've ever had.
It sounds wonderful. For Michael, how did he end up working for the post office? How did that come about?
So Phil obviously only knew a certain amount of Michael's life story because he, had only known him for 10 months. They'd been sort of together before he died.
Yeah.
I found out more from Michael's family, but he grew up as sort of one of 10 siblings in Derby. It was a loving household from what his sister Patricia remembered. She was the sibling who was just a bit older than him. They liked dressing up together and dancing. They would put on little shows and put on the record player in their front room and have fancy dress parties. He loved dressing up as a punk rocker. And then when he grew up, he worked in retail. And then after that, he moved into post office work at some stage. He also got a degree as a mature student, a technology degree. So when he moved into post office work, he ran a post office in Preston with a former partner, and then he would work at other post offices around Blackpool after that.
When he lived in Blackpool, we used to go and see him, and that was like some of the best memories, really.
And he'd worked for the post office for many years.
And what was it a job he enjoyed?
Certainly his family said that he took pride in it. He was always on time. Customers really liked him. He liked interacting with customers. It was a job he took great pride in and, worked very hard at. Didn't take much time off and was really good at his job from what colleagues told me.
Well, Hugo, take us back to Friday, August the 16th, 2013. Where exactly was Michael working at this point and what happened?
So Michael and Phil had moved to Stockport and he was working at a post office in a cost cutter supermarket. It was called Turnstone Road Post Office. On August the 16th, Michael was going to work as normal around 8:30.
This is what he was telling me. He went in there just per normal on a Friday morning. And there were people outside.
Post office had sent 5 people, according to this internal report that they wrote into what happened to him after he died. 2 security managers, a lead auditor and 2 support auditors. So the police were there too. Michael was arrested, taken to Cheadle Heath police station in Stockport and held there. In the post office when he was arrested, the report said how he was agitated and anxious when he saw the investigators Helen Rose and Stephen Bradshaw turn up, and he sort of shouted to the manager that he hadn't done anything wrong. Then the post office and police went to his house. Phil was there when this happened. 2
people from the post office, a man and a woman.
Yeah.
And then there was probably about 4 or 5 coppers.
Right, okay.
That turned up at the house. And they were lovely, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And they said, we want to search the house because Mike had been accused of everything else. I was like, yeah, okay, come in, carry on.
And they searched through cupboards, they went up to all the bedrooms, searched every room. While Michael was sitting in a police cell, they found about £1,000 worth of euros, which Phil had actually just changed. It was his holiday pay from his job as a pub chef because they were about to go on a holiday to Gran Canaria. They confiscated that, they took his phone, they took some stamps.
They took it all the places as evidence.
Right.
I said, well, okay, then not realised. I just said, yeah, carry on.
Yeah.
I had a laptop there, which was Mike. He said,
Yeah.
do you want to take that? I said, no, we don't need that.
Mike was suspended from work. He got home about 4 p.m. after being bailed by the police, and he was upset when Phil told him that they'd searched the house, and he was upset because he said, well, I didn't want them in my house, and particularly he didn't want the post office investigators in his house, and he felt upset that they had done that. Phil just said, well, he had to let them in.
I mean, Hugo, just take us back to that moment, because this starts as a normal day at work for Mike. He walks in, there are these auditors, there's the police. What exactly did they think he'd done, and why was it him that they were pointing fingers at?
So one thing that we were able to refer to was the post office internal report that they did into after Michael killed himself. They did a report into the behaviour of the investigation regarding this alleged fraud. So that has some details. Basically, they were accusing him of, from what the post office says, fraud. The police told me that he was arrested for theft by employee. And we don't know a lot about it. It wasn't to do with a theft from Turnstone Road Post Office in Stockport where he was arrested. It was from a previous job in a post office near Blackpool that they were accusing him of this crime. And apart from that, all we know is actually that he told Phil that he was being accused of stealing 15,000. Well, that's what Phil remembers.
Just said he was in the police station, so he got arrested for fraud. And it was £15,000 he was accused of.
15,000?
15,000, yeah.
Yeah.
Apart from that, we don't know a lot about what this investigation was and how it came about.
Do we know how it affected him?
He's just very quiet.
Yeah.
Very, very quiet.
Yeah.
Because he suffer from depression anyway.
According to Phil and also his family, he wasn't somebody who talked a lot about his work and also about how he felt. So Phil obviously knew because he was there and this happened while they were living together, but his family didn't know anything about this arrest and this investigation until after he died. The police told them that they were free to go on their holiday. He was on bail. So they went on holiday, I think it was only a few days later, which they'd had booked since earlier that year, to Gran Canaria. And they went there for a week and they tried to have a laugh.
Yeah. He just wanted to not talk about it.
Yeah.
To be fair. We didn't really.
Yeah.
So I laughed, trying to have a bit of a laugh. And
yeah.
He wants to go on a nudist beach. I'm like, no, I'm not going on a nudist beach, no, thank you.
Right.
Did that when I was younger.
But it was hanging over him and he was very worried about it.
I think he was more thought about going to prison. And
yeah.
Obviously, you get accused of that, you're going to go to prison 9 times out of 10.
And that moment in the cost cutter when he was confronted by these investigators and the police, do we know how that played out? And do we know much about the investigators who were there?
In that cost cutter that day, the post office had sent these 5 people. 2 of them were the investigators, Helen Rose and Steve Bradshaw. People who followed the post office inquiry, they saw these 2 investigators gave evidence. They were linked to lots of investigations into postmasters. We have the internal report about what happened to Michael from the post office's point of view. And in that, it says that he had complained about the conduct of the investigators, of Mr. Bradshaw and Mrs. Rose. We don't know the exact nature of his complaint. We think it was probably around what happened at the Turnstone Road post office and their behaviour there to him, and we don't know much more about it, but that was one of the reasons they carried out a report into their behaviour.
Hugo, you were telling us about 2 of the investigators who turned up that day in the cost cutter in 2013 to help with the arrest of Michael Mann. The post office have looked into them and looked into their conduct during a number of these investigations, but particularly Michael Mann's. What did they decide?
So back in 2013, in December, just 2 months after Michael died, the post office asked an employee called Colin Stretch to conduct an inquiry into it. So they did a report into the behaviour of the security investigation regarding the alleged fraud committed by Michael Mann, post office manager at Turnstone Road Post Office. It's a 2-page report, and Colin Stretch says his approach was to interview the 5 people who attended the post office that day from the post office, and a previous sub-postmaster from Blackpool that Michael worked for, and the owner of the cost cutter. He carried out this report with the agreement of Angela van der Bogaard. She was made famous by the ITV drama as well, called Part of the Gruesome Twosome with Paula Venables, who was chief executive. Stretch's report says he found no grounds to support the allegations made by Michael. His conclusion was that from the 7 interviews he's conducted and his own observations, that there were no grounds to support the allegations made by Mann. I do not believe that Bradshaw and Rose acted inappropriately. And that was that. This was in 2013. They were still prosecuting postmasters at this time. And yeah, it wasn't until the inquiry that it's come up that this could have been an injustice.
And Hugo, you mentioned that we've learnt a lot more in the inquiries that have followed. Do we know what's happened to Helen Rose and Stephen Bradshaw and some of those people who turned up to investigate and arrest Michael?
I think it was only a couple of weeks or even less after the TV drama came out that Stephen Bradshaw was called to give evidence at the post office inquiry. It was obviously, at the time, the drama had sort of caused outrage across the country, and people were, I think, stunned that he was still working there. He'd worked there for nearly 40 years by the time he left earlier this year. Bradshaw gained notoriety after appearing at the inquiry, and he was accused of intimidation and bullying.
Other people have described you as very confrontational. This is the way you behaved, isn't it?
That's not correct, no.
Do you accept you behaved unprofessionally?
No.
Do you accept that it was part of the culture within the investigation team to intimidate and abuse sub-postmasters?
No.
And when giving evidence at the inquiry, he denied that he and others behaved like mafia gangsters looking to collect their bounty with threats and lies. But his behaviour was subject to multiple complaints by sub-postmasters. I've done other interviews with other ex-postmasters who were interviewed by him and found him extremely intimidating and bully-like. There was one postmistress who he put in a parcel lift to take up to be interviewed in Liverpool at a depot. He's denied this and said the lift was fine, but she was really distressed by that. So Rose was involved in several wrongful prosecution cases. She was also involved in the Lee Castleton case. He was one of the postmasters whose story was depicted in the TV drama 2. He was taken to the High Court by the Post Office and pursued for legal costs of $321,000, which bankrupted him. When giving evidence, Rose was accused of memory failures.
Are these memory failures really genuine, Mrs. Rose?
Absolutely. I left Post Office 7.5 years ago. I have no recollection of a lot of the things.
And accused of giving an inaccurate witness statement, which was used in the legal proceedings against Castleton. When asked why, she told the inquiry, "I can't recall, I don't know." She was on the stand in September 2023 at the inquiry, and after she had given a lot of evidence on Lee Castleton, Castleton's lawyer, Flora Page Casey, asks her about Michael Mann and the internal Post Office report that I've referred to, which sort of cleared Bradshaw and Rose of any wrongdoing.
A Mr. Michael Mann. Do you recall this?
I've read the documentation, which is refreshed, but I don't recall the investigation now.
You don't recall an investigation into a sub-postmaster who killed himself?
I can recall an incident. I can't recall the details of the investigation.
Pressed by the lawyer that it only happened 10 years ago, she said, "No, I don't recall the incident, the actual investigation." Colin Stretch, the guy who wrote the report, I think I did find him via a social network site, but he didn't see my message yet or reply to it.
So there are still questions surrounding all of that. In the meantime, for Michael Mann, he had complained